Mods at Jagex had their semi-annual Game Jam, a week off from their normal projects so they can work on new and exciting ideas for the game. Let's take a look at what they've shared so far and what might be coming to the game soon. All this stuff can be found on Twitter under the OSRS Game Jam hashtag, but there's also posts on the official website and Reddit as well. Let's get right into the Completionist Cape. So Jagex Husky, Mod Husky, shared this as the first one to share it, and he started off with the interface. So the Completionist Cape would be built on a task system similar to combat achievements. You have a whole bunch of tasks spread throughout skilling, combat, clues, exploration, and other kinds of tasks that you can complete, as well as other base requirements. So obviously, like base requirements, like you want to max, you want to have your music unlocked, capes, maybe achievement diaries, and combat tasks to some level, and that's going to be your basis for combat achievements, for Completionist Cape. But in addition, then you're going to have these other tasks that you can complete, and they're going to be something that you're going to want to complete a certain amount of them for the Completionist Cape to be done. And that's kind of your percentage that you can see up here. A couple different mods chipped in on this project. If you look down below, there's some replies. Here's the original Comp Cape models for normal and trimmed. I think this is the trimmed with the gold, but I'm not really sure. As well as other versions for the Missouri and the Infernal. So it looks like they kind of taken the approach that the Max Cape has currently, where the base version would have the functionality of the teleports and that sort of thing, and then you could also combine it cosmetically with our best in slot capes, so that it would have, different versions, but those probably wouldn't have the teleports and stuff. It would just be a skin. But the other mods also chimed in a bit on their ideas. Some of them were talking about the amount of tasks that you could have. It's not very set in stone, but it's something that they've discussed. Something right here where it's saying like 85% completion, like about the tasks. Maybe that's something that they care about. There's something, one of the mods was talking about log slots. I think it was Mod Curse. He was talking about how log slots can be tied in as maybe something similar to like a 50% for the standard, and then like the higher you get, there's like an 80-90% threshold that they would have you go for. So that's something that could be in play. I think a lot of this is pretty interesting. Obviously, Comp Cape is something that people have talked about for a long time because it was in RS3, and it was a great goal for people to go for endgame. To keep your gameplay exciting and keep you motivated for those end game tasks that are ultimately just for completion's sake and not as exciting as maxing or anything that's like a super standard grind already. But it does keep you going towards that end game stuff. I think the approach that they've discussed here in terms of a percent completion is pretty interesting, because one of the major problems with Comp Cape in the past has been that they have to update it constantly to add new tasks and new things that come out, and B, that people don't want new updates to come in because then it would update the Comp Cape, where in this way, if new stuff comes in, you actually do want it to come in, because if you do that new stuff, it could just give you more percentage, and it gets you closer and closer to trim. If trim is 90%, for example. So that's Comp Cape, a pretty interesting first project. This one kind of came out of nowhere, although it has been discussed a bit in the community. And yeah, it seems like it got a lot of positive feedback. There's a lot of replies here saying like, we're super open to this. We definitely want it. I love it. Looks amazing. Make them best in slot. Love the idea. Looking forward to grinding it. Like, people like this, and ultimately I think it probably will come in the game, and it's just a matter of time. And it's good to see so many mods putting a lot of thought toward it and getting us going on this project. Before we move to the next one, I want to ask you to just take 1 second to see if you're subscribed. Pretty much no one's subscribed to this channel, but it really helps me out. I'm trying to get to 1,000 so we can, get a partnership for the channel going. But that would be great if you took the time to do that. Anyway, let's move on to the next thing. The next thing is Group Slayer Masters. So Mod Skylark whipped up this model. The original idea was from Rock and Halo, And basically what this is it's a remake and rework of the Partner Slayer system. So the Partner Slayer system, if you don't know, used to be a system where you and a friend could group up and you would both get the same Slayer task. So this means that you could go slay together and, keep talking about whatever is the best anime or whatever else that you wanted to talk about while you were doing Slayer. But it was pretty bare bones. The system didn't work very well, and it ended up being used for like boosting and other like weird mechanics where you would get some XP and then your partner would get some XP and you could like bypass each other's task lists, and like it was very strange and kind of clunky. So ultimately they removed it because it was getting abused. But this seems to be a more rudimentary, like full rework of this sort of idea and to bring it into the game with some more features. So ultimately it would be a different master. It would be like these three would be their own master and you would go and get a task from them. Some of the other ideas that they had talked about down here was about having it as a totally separate task list and point counter. So like when you do a group slayer task, it would be like you did one group slayer task and you get 10 group slayer points. And you could spend those on specific rewards, such as weapon cosmetics, like, a skin for the Dragonheart crossbow. One of the other things they mentioned was weapon cosmetics for Granite Mall, I think. There were also like some utility benefits, such as aggression potions for Slayer monsters. There was maybe the access to different variants of monsters, such as, we have Greater Necreals, which is like the higher level version of Necreals. You could have something like that for other monsters as well, based on the group slayer areas. So maybe some of those tasks that aren't loved as much would become more wanted in the group slayer variant. The rewards would be based on the contribution, so there's no leeching. It's basically like if you do 70% of the task and someone else does 30%, then you would get 70% of the XP and they would only get 30%. So it's not like you would be able to give someone more Slayer XP than they deserved. And yeah, the task would be for a total group kill count. So instead of me getting 100 gargoyles and my friend getting 100 gargoyles, they would give us together 200 gargoyles. They'd be like, your group task is 200 gargoyles. And we'd be like, okay, sweet. We'll both go and continue to kill gargoyles together, and the counter would tick down like that. I really think that's a pretty standard idea in terms of like it makes sense and it is not complicated, but it's interesting to think about it from a coding perspective and be like, is this something that they can do in the back end? Because it becomes almost mini game like, where you have a number that the game is storing not for you or for your partner, but for like a totally separate like combined entity. And I don't know how that persists upon logout and over different sessions, and if only one of you's logged in and the other one isn't. Like, it's kind of complicated, but I mean, if they say that they can make it work, then that sounds good to me. They also said that they could have potentially like group superior monsters, which would be kind of cool. So kind of like a mini boss. We have our superior Slayer monsters right now in the game, but if you had an even bigger one, like say, like a Super Dust Devil or something, that's like 3x3, and when it appears, both you and your partner have to both face it at the same time, and it has like some mechanics to make you work together like a mini boss. That could be cool, and of course could get some unique drops, utility or cosmetic or otherwise. So that's a pretty interesting project for sure, and I think it's very like worthwhile for them to take it on, considering how many people, a surprising amount to me, at how many people have asked for the return of Partner Slayer. Frankly, I feel like Slayer is usually a very solo activity. Maybe you see someone while you're killing something, but like most of the time you want to be alone in the room, because otherwise like your spawns get taken and it's not really the same. So hopefully this gets the loving care that it needs to make Partner Slayer actually good and not just like a worse version of single Slayer. Next up is the Rat Boss. So this is a basic mock-up of the Rat Boss. Basically, the core idea would have been the legend of a Rat King, which is when like it's a real life thing. It's when rats' tails like get knotted together and then they all start acting as one like fucked up rat entity. But the basic idea for the gameplay update would be a free-to-play boss. So this is a free-to-play boss that teaches basic combat mechanics like movement and prayer switching. The things that all other bosses, use as mechanics, but that noobs aren't going to know anything about. Potentially, they also mentioned that it could have customizable difficulty, including, maybe something to make it a little harder, something to make it a little easier. Like when you get into it, obviously you want it to be as easy as possible so that people aren't afraid or unwilling to try it out. But if it's good enough, it's easy. If it's easy enough for noobs to do it on their first day of the game, then maybe you want it to be able to increase in difficulty a bit afterwards, or else it would be pretty boring after the first day. There were also some thoughts to manage prayer drain within this boss, like a specific maybe prayer doesn't drain in there, or maybe there's an altar, or maybe there's like some other items that you get in there to restore your prayer. Because if you didn't know, free to play doesn't have prayer potions, and they don't have very high prayer levels either, because the only thing they can do is bury bones and bury big bones. So really it takes a long time for them to get anywhere in terms of prayer levels. And so it's like if you had a boss that's based on prayer switching and movement, then it's like, well, their prayers are only going to be lasting about 1 to 2 minutes total. So you're going to pretty much want something to help with them with that, because otherwise it's not going to be a very fun fight, especially if you have to like leave and go to an altar between every kill. That would kind of suck. So that's the rat boss. I think that this probably will come into the game maybe. Free-to-play updates obviously aren't the most exciting, because most people in free-to-play either don't care about updates or don't want them. If you really cared about updates, you would be in members, and the free-to-play people are pretty much just trying the game out for the first time, so they don't need new updates. They just need to get a hold of what the game is and whether they care enough to buy members and play the full game. And then the other half of the free-to-play people are pretty much the die-hard skillers who just want to play a very classic version of OSRS without any new updates. So really where this boss fits is like it needs to onboard you into members and be like, oh, there is more to this game than just killing cow with bronze scimitar, which I think is not that hard to do. But definitely means, like, for us experienced players, it probably won't be a big draw. But I could see it be added to the game as part of their focus, especially on new player retention and growth. I think it would be good for that. So look to see this in the game. Maybe not this year, but maybe next year. It definitely seems like something that could happen. Next up, we have kind of a short focus. There wasn't too many details on this, but Mod Other, who I've never heard of before, he's a junior content developer, has been looking at a potential expansion to the Hunter skill, focusing on tracking to learn a creature before capturing it for a Hunt Master. So there's a lot of things here. First off, it's like Hunter expansion. Great. The Hunter is a skill that has had couple different methods, but an expansion would definitely be interesting. It definitely gives taming vibes. We just had a discussion on taming as a skill where you are interacting with animals not in a kill them and hunt them way, but in a partner with them and learn about them and that sort of thing. So it definitely gives that sort of vibe. But then again, you have this Hunt Master thing where that's more of a, like, it sounds almost like Slayer, because they're giving you assignments of different animals to capture and bring back. And one of the things that they promise is new animals such as the capybara, which we have here. And there was a lot of focus in the rest of the material about the capybara as an example of a fun new animal to model. That I think probably was also discussed during taming, I'm going to guess. But in terms of details, this one is pretty light. There's a discussion of a new pet, There's a discussion of like this diverse set of wildlife, so just adding a ton of new animals to the game, which like I think was great in general. I always like seeing new animals, especially ones that aren't like totally weird. Like you give me a big toad or something, like I think that would be cool. But ultimately, this one isn't too heavy on detail, so I wouldn't expect to see an update of this kind come into the game without a lot more work to expand it and make it into a proper update. But interesting to see that some kind of ideas for hunter expansions are being talked about, because it is a skill that hasn't really been touched that much, apart from some combination methods like aerial fishing and the fossil island stuff. Although even those were like, they've been in the game quite a while now, so it hasn't received any updates in a while. Next up, I don't have an image for it, but there was something about resting that mod Lenny made. So they've talked about this a little bit in Q&As, where they had this idea of something to help with run energy, because new players don't really appreciate the low run energy that you get when you start the game, and it feels like they don't really realize that you can buy energy potions or staminas, or they don't want to spend money on that, or they don't know like that training agility really helps and that sort of thing. So it's like it's just a really big barrier, and it would be nice if you had some way for them to address that. So resting, we saw Lenny posted something about sitting around a fire. There was also something about going to a pub and having, sleeping a night in one of their beds in the pub, and that would restore your stats and your run energy. This is pretty interesting. Currently, there is a feature to restore your stats, run energy, and stuff by going to Ferox Enclave. They had the White Portal, and of course, they have some stat restore pools there too now as well. So a lot of experienced players, when they're starting out an account, will use the minigame teleport for that sort of thing to restore their run energy, prayer, health, everything, instead of having to eat food or drink potions. But new players don't necessarily know about that, or they don't have the ability to get there consistently with dueling rings or with minigame teleports. So giving them another way to restore their stats and to keep moving around the game efficiently would be good, I think. Obviously, this is like a bit of an engine change, but not a huge update. And again, with their focus on new player retention and new player experience, I definitely think that the resting thing is something that could come into the game. Although I do see it being a bit contentious in terms of polls, because, that new player experience is something that people care a lot about in terms of what's a classic old school experience, and definitely like not having a lot of run energy walking around because you can't run, and then having to train agility to get your run restore going faster. That is pretty classic part of the game. So I definitely think not everyone would want that to go away, but then again, we do already have staminas and stuff, so, and pools and everything that makes that not an issue for endgame players. And I also think that it could be less of an issue for new players. I think that would be good. Next thing we'll cover is these Graceful Skilling outfits. So one of these mods, Mod Jerv, Skylark and Jagex Hend are coming up with this idea of Graceful Skilling outfit combinations. So one of the things that people don't like about Graceful is that it's kind of a default skilling outfit, in that if you're going to be doing any skilling that's running around, like you're going to be wanting to wear the Graceful outfit. And things like the farming outfit that like have minor benefits ultimately usually aren't that good to be using, because you want to be using the Graceful outfit anyway. And if you did, then you have to use staminas instead. So it ends up being that Graceful is just kind of the default outfit worn everywhere, and you don't get like any fashionscape, you don't get any variation, and you certainly don't have the ability to wear whatever you want. So this is to address that a little bit. Basically, it would combine Graceful with some of the existing skilling outfits to make the benefits of both at the same time. Obviously, here we have runecrafting, farming, and smithing, but I assume it could also apply to like the fishing outfit, the woodcutting outfit, mining, and thieving as well. I don't think this is a bad idea per se. Although I will say I don't really like the look of the outfits. One of the things, especially with the rune crafting outfit, the robes, the raiments of the eye, I think they're called, yeah. Like that, they just look really nice, and I think that they did a great job on the graphics of those, and I don't want them all to look like graceful, really, because that doesn't really fit with the skill, like the skill is rune crafting, it's not agility. And if every skills outfit looked like graceful, just with the colors of their skilling outfit, then I would be like, well, is this really a smithing outfit, or is it just an agility outfit in the colors of smithing? And maybe something like they have here with this apron kind of bit makes it look a bit more smithing. But I still think that personally I prefer the graphics of the OG outfits. And I would prefer them to just give us the graceful benefit as a passive with these outfits without changing the look. But, this is interesting to look at for sure, at least. And maybe if I see it in game, it's different. Yeah. I would say that this project probably could come as a QOL, like quality of life poll update. Because pretty much it just needs some way to combine them, and then the artist to whip it up. It's probably not that difficult to do as a project, and if people really want them, which I'm sure, like, this definitely sounds like a project that I think Reddit would like. No offense, Reddit, but you guys are kind of complainers about skilling and graceful and run energy and that kind of nonsense, which I don't think really affects your gameplay as much as maybe some people think that they do, but I'm sure people would vote for it, basically, is what I'm saying. And because of that, I think it has a good chance of getting to a poll, although it probably won't be a priority. So maybe like sometime later this year. That's what I would think. The last thing that I'll mention is Path of Glowfree. So I don't have the graphic for it, but Mod Ed hinted that he's working on Path of Glowfree. And Path of Glowfree is a quest port from RS2. It was a story quest continuing the Glowfree line from Eyes of Glowfree. And it had story based about gnomes and Hazelmere, who's an existing character, and basically hinted toward the existence of a hidden gnome city called Arposandra. And the main thing that changed once the game came out is that they introduced a couple new monsters for Slayer, warped terrorbirds and warped tortoises, I think. And they kind of sucked. No one really liked the monsters, but the quest itself was cool. It had a cool story. It was like a puzzle-based quest. And expanded the lore of the world a bit. One interesting part about it is that Arposandra, the city, was never actually released in RS3 or RS2. They kind of gave up on the gnome storyline, it seems like, and it never got there, with Hazelmere eventually dying, and then his, storyline got kind of subsumed into the larger World Guardian storyline. But ultimately, I think that doesn't have to be what happens here. Hazelmere has been hinted to be kind of a very old, maybe immortal being with great power. And I think that bringing him back into the storyline of old school could be a great way to like take it in a new direction, where this time actually we are going to see the Gnome City, and this could tie into some of the existing Gnome storylines like Monkey Madness and stuff. So it could definitely be something that I would be interested in exploring. I would hope that if they're going to release those warped monsters, that they totally change what they're about and what they're used for, and maybe give them a unique drop that would be interesting for Slayer or for farming or something to match with the gnome flavor. But that remains to be seen. Ultimately, I think it's just something that, Mod Ed loves quests, and this is a great candidate for a quest that could be ported back because it wasn't too far after the old school release date. And we'll see what they do with it. So that's about it. Game Jam. We have a whole bunch of concepts that the mods have been touching on. There's some other stuff that they discussed, such as some wildy expansion stuff and, some graphics work on the capybaras and other animals, but I'm not going to focus too much on that. Obviously, the core ideas that I thought were the most interesting, the graceful outfits, the hunter expansion, the rat boss for free-to-play, the group slayer rework and master, and of course, the completionist cape. I'm looking forward to a lot of more info about this stuff and to see what the rest of the team was working on. Obviously, I think because it's Game Jam, a lot of these projects are a departure from their normal tasks, which, as we know, like, their normal tasks are probably centered around the updates that we do know about coming out, such as forestry, such as sailing, and such as a Desert Treasure 2. So that's about it for Game Jam. We'll see if we learn any more. But for now, I think this was a pretty successful Game Jam. It definitely sounds like some cool projects and ones that definitely could come into the game. So I'm looking forward to that. If you liked all this info, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Again, I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can get a monetization partnership. And until then, be sure to check out some other videos. And have a great day. Peace.